Hi, and welcome to a new season of Fearless and Free podcast, where we take a holistic spirit, soul, body approach to healing and wholeness. I'm your host, Dana Grindal, prayer minister and founder of Whitestone Ministries International. You have found a safe place to connect with the body of Christ, where we challenge Christians to experience the abundant life of Christ, fearless and free. In the last episode, we had a special guest with us, guest expert Molly McNamara, to discuss healing the heart of the church in the area of suicide awareness and prevention. If you missed that episode, you will want to go back and listen. Molly shared valuable information about how to walk alongside those who have lost a loved one to suicide. Today, she's with us again as we discuss another important conversation about how to walk alongside a young person who is struggling with suicidal thoughts and wanting to turn away from life. Before I introduce her, I do want to let you know what you can expect in this conversation today. We'll be discussing how to recognize invitations that a young person gives to identify that they are considering, that they may be withdrawing from life. We're going to learn how young people can respond to help their friends. Yes, young people can help their friends in this conversation. We will also empower parents with practical tools and resources to help your young person walk towards life. I do want to just pause and say, if you or someone you love has been touched by suicide, help is available. We will share contact information at the end of this episode and in the show notes for ministries and medical professionals that can help. Please do reach out today. That said, let's bring on Molly. Welcome back, Molly.
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be in Fearless and Free again. This is a great offering, and I'm so excited that you are tackling this topic for the church.
Thank you so much. And just in case our listeners haven't yet gotten to listen to the previous episode, I want them to know who you are. So Molly is the founder and executive director of His Whole House. She holds credentials as an ordained and licensed minister, as a nurse, a medical nurse, grief and bereavement counselor, and trauma practitioner. She works alongside a team of trained prayer therapists. She draws from advanced trauma concepts and science in conjunction with biblical principles in the work of prayer ministry and healing. So we're so glad to have you with us, Molly.
Thank you so much.
Yes. So as we can really continue our conversation from the previous episode, I know in my work with clients, I have seen young people as young as 8 come in and that were struggling with suicidal thoughts at the young age of 8, feeling that life wasn't worth living and they didn't want to be here. That was a surprise to me, honestly, the first time I encountered someone that young. And we recognized that what's happening in young people is more than just an emotional response. It's more than being, some people think it's being weak or weak-minded. I've heard that reference, that it's, a weakness or weak-minded. That also is a myth and lie. I'd like to just invite you to speak into this. From your work, what do you believe is the cause of the mental health crisis that is impacting people as young as early childhood in this young adulthood?
Well, that's a very large question. And any one of us, and especially our young people, can turn away from life. And it's about the threshold of pain and suffering and the lack of those abilities to know how to navigate the pain, the ability to recognize and connect back with group experiences or relationships in ways that are going to be healthy, to engage the brain, and also for we as the church to really understand that this is a real threat to our understanding and life. I've heard a lot of people say, well, they just need Jesus. And that's not wrong. That's absolutely true. But the element of negotiating and learning about how to keep our hearts and our bodies and our souls connected towards life is a process that has to be learned and integrated into our everyday life. And so any life can be triggered to turn away, anybody. And that kind of element is that we need to learn more about the actions, the words, physical changes, and feelings as seen as expressive indicators of distress. When we can look at those and begin to connect to those for our friends, our family, our those young people that are coming up, the youth today, as we all understand, youth and that teenage young adult time is the most horrendous and painful time because their body's changing, their soul is changing. They're trying to integrate some cognitive and emotional wherewithal into their abilities. And then they have some spiritual challenges about becoming their own person. And all those weave together with what we're seeing today with the sidetracking and the minimizing of face-to-face or person-to-person relationships by virtue of our movies, our television time, our time gaming or getting in the cell phone. All those are wonderful alternative moments to have having fun or to work on some things, but they become the go-to. And so the group experience has really changed. And I'm not really 100% sure that we're all, as believers, ready for how that relationship, how that atmosphere will look, how it looks today. Can we navigate and not turn away ourselves from how to connect with the young people in regard to what to do next and how to walk through the times of pain rather than turning away? Did I answer your question? I'm not totally sure.
Yes, yes, yes. You definitely did. You definitely did. And I think something that's important that I've recognized in my work and my own personal story as well. I think adults, when adults are grieving or adults are walking through something hard, obviously they're feeling the overwhelming pain of their own grief. And they don't always recognize or know that children need to grieve and young people need to be included in those conversations and have a place to grieve. I have seen that be a place where children have kind of been lost in the process or didn't have a place, as we talked about, creating these safe spaces to share how you really feel and have someone that is really listening and walking with you and caring. So I think that is an important part that I want to bring to this conversation for our listeners is that children and young people, they're not too young to talk about death and hard things. Like they need to be included in an appropriate way in that conversation so that they can have a place to express what they feel and have a place to process that. How have you seen that, or how would you advise, when there has been a loss and now this young person maybe has lost a family member or a sibling? How would you express that?
I'd like to point out that that's an excellent, that you're starting from a good position when you share that the children and the young adults need a place to grieve and need to be acknowledged for having grief. That's one of the elements. I recall listening to a gentleman who said that when the children were expressing what had happened to them by his own hand, and he was in his addiction, and so he did not remember what had happened. And just what he said was so telling. He said, I didn't think you all even knew what was happening. It's interesting that we've come a long way. In today's society, parents are usually more attuned to the children knowing what has happened. But here's the other side of the coin, is that when the grief or the horrendous trauma event happens, and again, there's going to be a tremendous loss here with any suicide or with, let's just take loss of, how about your best friend? Let's just use that as an analogy. And loss of your best friend, whether that's a moving away, moving across town, skipping a grade, or being lost as a death, any of that is a place to consider that person, that young adult or young person, is really in a place of grieving and to respect the work of grief, meaning that there'll be a shock. It's a time of denial. You be angry. That's valid. That you'll be trying to negotiate. You try to find a way. Oh, what if I did this? If I did that? Well, maybe if I was better. That negotiation time, and then ultimately that place of being able to let go and to accept. And those are the areas of grief that we are familiar with, but they bounce back and forth. They bounce back and forth. And learning to walk alongside your young person in the cadence of it and how they are able to share their grief is going to help that child or young adult be able to walk through it. And so I'll give you an example. Young child did see the death of their parent, their mother, and some 3 years later was in the grocery store, and the clerk said, "Hey," to the child, who was now 6 years old, had seen the death of their mother at 3. "Hey, where's your mother?" And the child said, as a concrete thinker, which is what a 6-year-old is, "Oh, she's dead." And the clerk, of course, was taken off guard and said, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And that child, teared up. And that's a very appropriate feeling. That's a very appropriate response. The child was able to hear, the child was able to receive. Now, what's interesting in this particular scenario is the father then walked out with the 6-year-old and tried to negotiate further discussion about the loss of his mother. And it overwhelmed him, and he began to throw himself down on the ground and have a tantrum. And that is because it was too much, too much. Our brains have need to come in and go out, come in and go out of the grieving process. And forcing that can also be a place of disconnect. And so sometimes we've seen children, like you mentioned, the 8-year-old, begin to act out or to just be totally rebellious. And it may be a response to overstimulating their brain with too much attempts to have them connect with the painful traumatic event. So this kind of understanding for the people that are walking alongside a young person or parents of a young person can be very valuable, so that we can learn how to walk in the cadence of the pain of grief and loss. And again, with suicide, when you start seeing those turning away from life, which is the acting out and the rebellion, that's a turning away from life, especially when it's a huge change in behavior. That's your moment where you want to back up a little bit and start building some framework to connect with life in a good experience, some benefit. Hey, let's play a board game tonight, or hey, can we take a walk? Or I'd love it if you join me in this. I'm going fishing down here by the creek. Hey, you want to join me? Just building in some desire to be with that young person in a positive mode as they begin to negotiate through the pain of the loss.
Yeah, those are some really key important things to recognize, in that children do feel the pain. They do need to express it, but they are still children, so only so much at a time, and just giving them grace for that, where we don't expect nothing from them, like they don't know what's happening, but we're also not expecting them to be able to process like an adult. You really said that well, so thank you for sharing that. You indicated that some behaviors, when we're talking about invitations, we're talking about what are things that are behaviorally, or maybe words that a young person might do or say that you describe as invitations. They're invitations for us to ask further, that they're invitations that that person is withdrawing from life. So you mentioned, someone very young may act out, they may throw these tantrums, may be very angry, may show tears. What are some other signs or invitations that a young person, young adult might be expressing that may or may not be known to be directly connected to grief?
Okay. This one is a negotiation to, as a parent, to be really in tune with your intuition, your sense of something going on, that intuition, that sense that there's something amiss, and to be able to ask questions without being threatening, without assuming, but in a way in which you're seeing or hearing something that is perhaps an invitation to that young one to go ahead and turn away from life because of something overwhelming. And this one is very subtle. It's something I believe that we all need to be more and more attuned to, because when we see young person giving away things that are precious to them, and that's the key word, is precious to them, that can be an invitation of considering turning away from life and ultimately attempting or completing suicide. So the giving away of things can be difficult to see if you're not willing to look at it. So, give an example of someone, a young adult who did complete suicide just 3 years ago today, and she is a family member. Her name is Lizzie. And Lizzie had a creative bent, and she enjoyed greatly being able to help others. And she had come out of her own addictions. She was living at home. And of course, those show risk factors in somebody that's in recovery from addictions. And that in itself is a risk factor. But she was living at home in that recovery period, and they had just newly moved to a new area. Again, anytime you have a transition of moving, particularly, or shifting, that also is a invitation to be careful and to be mindful that transition is a type of loss. I don't know that we all consider that. Great, we got a new place to live, and it's going to be bigger and better and great, and it's going to be fabulous, and we all get excited. But there is a loss there that oftentimes gets discounted. And so Lizzie was moving into this new location, new home, and recovering from addictions. All are indicators and invitations to the potential of turning away from life in some way. So, key times. And she adored being able to help others, and she was going to school online and taking psychology. So, very interested in becoming a counselor. So her go-to, because she felt very compelled about the homeless population in this new area she had moved to, she wanted to go and help with the homeless. She played the guitar. Excellent, excellent, wonderful connection with life. Music is a great therapy, and we use music in our ministry to work with individuals. And so she was going and playing the guitar for homeless populations down in the city center in the evening time, which was her best time. And a lot of young people are evening or nighttime folk, right? So she's doing that. And her parents were beside themselves. And for a variety of reasons, they were really opposed to her doing her guitar playing at the evening hours. And I understand their concerns. However, Lizzie was 20 years old. And a 20-year-old, of course, we know is someone that we need to, as parents, we need to move into more of a coaching framework and to suggest, but to be very mindful about their need to make their own decisions. So Lizzie began to collect socks. She just absolutely adored having socks to give to the homeless people. And so her one clue before Lizzie suicided was that she began to just say that she didn't want anything to do with socks anymore. It was a very interesting clue that she was trying to tell her parents. And she didn't want anything to do with the homeless people anymore. She didn't want to play the guitar anymore. She didn't want anything to do with the socks, and she wasn't going to go help them. And so those were all invitations. And really, it was time to sit down and hear Lizzie's heart on what had changed her mind. Where was she going with this? What was her thoughts? So that loss of interest, giving things away that she found was a blessing at one point, and suddenly she gave it away. And then the extreme behavior change was the other action she exhibited on that example, because the extreme behavior change was suddenly all that she loved was she was turning away from it. So it's the turning away and catching the moment of the invitation and the actions of giving away things. Isolation is another element of the actions to look at. Misuse of alcohol and drugs. And again, Lizzie in this case was at risk. So even though she wasn't using them, just her having been in that addiction world then really puts that risk on the table for her. And then another risk to look for is self-harm.
Fearless and Free, Spirit, Soul, and Body with Dana Grindal is brought to you by Melissa Hudson, realtor with BHGRE, Gary Green. Melissa knows that selling or buying a house is one of the most important financial decisions you will make. Her expertise as a former accountant, professional organizer, and mother of 4 brings you valuable insight into the decision-making process. Melissa is committed to providing structure, efficiency, and excellent communication so you have the information needed to make the best decisions that are right for you. After all, this is not just a house, but a home. Contact melissa.hudson@garygreen.com or 281-844-2184. Again, 281-844-2184.
Yeah, thank you. That's a really great list of invitations, things that anyone could recognize, especially if you know the person. And I think that's key that you highlighted. When you know what's normal for them and normal behavior, if they're normally socially outgoing or normally really enjoy participating in certain groups or activities and then suddenly don't want anything to do with that. Yeah, those are some really key highlights. Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. And I'm thankful that we can honor Lizzie today and her life and the things that brought her joy. So thank you for sharing her with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, since we were talking about parents, I'm going to skip around a little bit in my order of questions, but in talking about parents, recognizing those changes in behavior or these invitations, when a parent recognizes that there are invitations for help from their young person or see these changes in behavior, what would you want to tell a parent that it's important to them to know about their response? You kind of hit on it, but I'd like to just open that if there's anything else specific that you would want parents to know is important in their response to their young person.
It's all about the perception of the young person. It's not about the advice. It's about the perception of the young person. Remember that reality of whatever, however they see it, is their reality, and honoring their reality is a place to start to connect. If they're standing, stay standing. If they're sitting, sit down. If they're on the floor, get down on the floor. It's about learning that your connection is exampled in a myriad of ways. I think of the parent that sat at the computer while the child was sharing their heart about their problems at school. It would have been great if that parent had got up from the computer, said, "Hey, this is too important. I'm going to turn off this computer. I know I got some work to do, but it can be done later. You're primary." Again, exempling to the young person the importance of hearing what they have to say and believing their reality is their reality. It may not be true. Let's be very candid. It may not be true, but it's their reality. Their reality being honored is your first key to connection. Honoring their connection of reality and the way that they see it is a place we can honor. And being mindful of the words that you hear with a young person. So let's say this parent that they've got up from the computer and they're listening to their young person, and they're sharing some words. So let's talk about invitations again by virtue of the words that they say. So some words might be something like, hey, my problems are going to end really soon. And, I know you're busy. Never mind. I don't need to keep bothering you. Or I really can't take this anymore. I just can't do anything right. I'm really stupid. Or I really can't think straight. I'm so confused. All those are keyword statements that really it's time to sit down and listen. It is about creating a place of connection and then actively listening. Actively listening means to learn more about how to ask open-ended questions. And that's what we do with our trainings with the parents and with our young adults, is asking those open-ended questions. Can you tell me more about what you're saying here? I'm really not understanding. And then you listen. And then they share, and oftentimes you'll hear what is kind of polar opposite. They'll say one thing about positive, and then they'll say the same thing and they'll make it negative. And letting them know, I'm hearing a positive and a negative in relation to your wanting this problem to end. Can you help me understand that? Not pointing out what's positive or what's negative, but giving them both examinations of what you're hearing and giving it back to them to share more. The sharing actually builds up. Again, we're back to the brain, but that brain will be able to process, and process is exquisitely important at the time of a response to any of these clues. It's about the process, and the process may be painful to the parent. I know it is painful when you have to set some things aside that may then not meet the deadline. But it's about setting priorities in order and even communicating that to your young person. Hey, you mean more to me than getting this spreadsheet done by my deadline. I'm going to sit down and hear you out. I do want to hear. Can we do that here now? And again, it's about negotiating. You sometimes can say, can you give me 10 minutes? Or perhaps it's overwhelming. You're hearing too many clues. Then it's, of course, the adult. We hope that they can say, you're my priority, not this spreadsheet. You mean more to me. I'm going to put this off and listen to you. That speaks volumes. Just the fact that a parent will sit down and listen. And Dana, you know this very well. You experience, and you have young adults, or fairly mature adults, really. They're all living their own lives, but they seem young to you and I. And you've lived through this. So this takes a lot of negotiation for a parent when there's a whole list of stuff to get done.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I had 3 kids that were born within 4.5 years. So those early years with 3 young ones, it was hard to have those personal conversations. And there were times, when they would say something negative about themselves. I'm just stupid, or I'm not good enough, or something. And I would respond back then, well, that's not true. You are smart. Instead of,
Oh my.
As a mom, I thought they were wonderful, and I didn't understand why they didn't think they were wonderful. And, just as I grew, as I read books, as I studied, as I went on the journey, I learned they needed space to talk. They needed space to open up. They needed space that was one-on-one, with mom or dad, not just in the group of all 3 of them together. And so we tried to create spaces for that. For us, bedtime was a good time. And I did make an intentionality. My husband traveled a lot. So that was a way, because I was there a lot with them alone. That was a way that I could individually put them to bed and give some time for those conversations, give some time for, hey, you said something earlier today about how stupid you are. Why would you say that? Or where did that come from? So just having some space for that became a healthy place for us to process. sometimes a place for me to apologize that I missed it, or didn't get it right. Just realizing when they were young, and even that starting that pattern of making intentional one-on-one time. I didn't always know the right thing to say. I didn't always meet them in the moment, but I will say that creating intentional time alone with each of them did create space over time to give them freedom to open up, to give them freedom to have those conversations. With boys, they don't like to be cornered. I have two boys, very different personalities. They don't want you to stare at them across the table and say, tell me how you're feeling. Now, when that girl said that at school, that must have been so painful. And they're just like, deer in the headlights. That's not in general the way that boys want to talk. With my daughter, we could just talk and talk and talk and talk on those kinds of things. With the boys, it was more like, let's do something alongside of them. So like we're in the car and we're not looking at each other in the eyes. They were more open to talk when you're not just staring them down. So those are the things that I learned over time. And of course, that bedtime space, when you're putting them to bed, the bedroom is meant to be a sanctuary. It's meant to be a safe space for them. So don't use that time as a parent to scold them, corner them, come and, all the things that they did wrong that day that you need to correct or fix. Like, don't go in there and corner them in their bedroom at night. Have that conversation in an open space, a community space, and then keep that bedroom space for prayers, for just, open, like anything you want to talk about today, anything that you want to tell me, just keeping it as an open, safe space, not as the space. And we learned that the hard way as well. With when middle school age is a challenging age, let's just be honest. And when one of our boys was in that middle school age, talking about things was hard for him. Talking about emotions was hard for him. And going in and cornering him did not have a positive result. So we took a class, learned about talking to teens, changed everybody's life when we learned how to give him some safe space. So creating these spaces, parents, I know it's hard. It's not easy with busy schedules. If you're a single parent, you don't have someone coming home to help, like I get it. Even if it's just take the time that you have, that make the most of car time, make the most of, the meals, whatever you have to make that space to hear them and validate their feelings. As Molly said, that is so important. Don't minimize it and say, oh, just wait till you're an adult. That's going to miss their heart. Just hear them where they are. So important. So Molly, in this conversation, as we're talking about for a parent that is walking alongside a young person, sometimes their young person that's struggling, it's not just that moment where we've moved. Sometimes it's over a long period of time. Maybe they struggle with some kind of physical challenge or a learning challenge in school, something that they struggle with over time. Is there a way that you would encourage parents, anything that you would want to add to this conversation about how to help a parent walk with their child who struggles with withdrawing from life over a longer period of time, maybe awkward in some way making friends, or maybe has interests that don't match, the popular things? Anything you would want to speak to that?
I think you bring up an excellent point, and that is to key into the design of the child, not necessarily what you'd like them to do and be, but perhaps more in tune with their skill mix. Someone that is more interested in the creative side, connect and learn more about the creative side of the brain and how very precious and special it is, and how very integral it is for our ability to receive and to be creative and to express. And the right side, of course, of the brain is the creative. The left side is the logical. And the logical has a place, but we're meant to be able to navigate both sides. So key into their design. Learn more about the design of us as individuals, how that there's space and place for their uniqueness. I recall a young person who came to us and we were working with him, and he just adored theater and he adored symphonies. And, he was in a family that was all about athletics. And the key for him in order to walk in his design was father that would be willing to go to those beautiful expressions that are so creative, the theatrical or the symphony, and to begin to come alongside that young person as that happened by gaining tools about the uniqueness of your child's design. You're going to be able to gain some leverage on how to connect. And again, I know, Dana, you expressed it so well with look for those places that are naturally in your family to be able to negotiate opportunities to connect. But it is important. Those with disabilities, this is about finding expressions of how they can expand and enlarge in the midst of what they have been given, not what they lack. So it's a whole different mindset. The Disabilities Act really came forward out of identifying what people lacked and trying to build strategies and ramps and bars and different hoists in order to help them. But it's always been to help them to negotiate the normality of their uniqueness, right? That is a application, a principle you can bring to parenting when you have a child that has a different framework than what is the other children or the majority that you might be seeing in the school.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, those are really great thoughts. And I know I was taught directly by the Lord along the way that if the Lord gave your child those gifts, they're meant to be there. So instead of trying to push them aside or form them into, our family is athletes or our family is academic or our family, these things that we have, maybe from where we came from in our family lines, we can miss a unique and special gift that God has given that young person. So if they have a gift and a desire for it, we need to ask the Lord, how can I help them? How can I partner with that? How do you want that to look? Sometimes, the music and creativity is meant to be a part-time joy, and sometimes it is meant to be their full-time, and we need to help them walk that out with the Lord. So that's a big conversation for another time. I have a major testimony in that area where the Lord showed up on behalf of my child and said, you need to get out of the way. I have given this child a gift. So he very much is interested in their gifts. And so we want to do that as well. I know there's so many important ways we want to end and just watching the time, but we can't not have this conversation without talking about technology. And I'm reminded of a young client that I had who had loving father, very involved in her life, but he went to bed early and she would be up, a 13-year-old, up half the night on her phone because all the kids had their phones and they were counseling each other. She started coming, I think, around 11, 12, 13 years old. They're sharing their problems with each other. They're counseling each other. They're talking about physical symptoms that they have, and they're looking up WebMD and diagnosing each other and telling each other what to do. And, they're treating each other without any parental involvement or knowledge. In this particular client, the Lord did actually use her and one of her young friends who was planning suicide. She did express and say that she was going to do it that night. And this young girl woke up her dad and got driven over there to wake up the mom. And she did intervene and save a life. But it opens just a giant awareness parents may not be aware of what's happening through technology. So how can we be involved in that as parents? How can we help empower our young people to recognize those invitations, to use those tools appropriately? I know we could do a whole podcast series on this.
Yeah. You're so right. You're so right. And really, again, we're looking at the group experience of society has changed. And the technology is a large part of the group experience now. And for parents to negate that is to lose your real opportunity to be able to be meaningful and to connect with what's going on in society. So what we found is that young people are doing an excellent job. They're a lot more resilient because they haven't learned all the limiting factors that adults often place on themselves and others. They are more free. And that freedom is bringing leverage, just like you said. I'm sure that when that 13-year-old was hearing desperate feelings, desperate words, angry, lonely, sad, hopeless, helpless, which are some of the feelings that you have invitation for with someone turning away from life, she was able to key in, and she keyed in a very holistic way. I really love it that she was able to wake up her father and to connect. Another way to do that with our young people is we're teaching them to go ahead and do a 3-way call with a 988 and get right on there with your buddy and go ahead and take that call together so that you're not leaving your friend, but you are able to connect them with some sources that can take them into moving forward into next steps of getting help. So technology is with us, and it's going to be, and it's time to embrace how that we can bring forward God's design through the areas by giving some problem solving skills to our young people. So that's why we suggest the Carry Plus course to young people or youth groups, or do it as a workshop or a weekend seminar, but get some leverage on working with the young people to empower them. We did that recently with Youth for Christ here in Houston, and it was quite successful. And their slogan is, we believe in youth. And so we came alongside as a fellow ministry and did a workshop on talking to others about suicide. And these youth were all over it. They were not afraid to stay up late and talk with their friend. Now, learning about what is their burden and when to give that burden to someone who has more expertise to get help for their friend is the key. And we do that training with the Carry Plus. But that openness of keeping an open heart and open mind about how God is going to help you negotiate, given what we have before us today, is doable, or none of us would be here. So I believe it's doable to empower our young adults. And we have seen amazing stories of different youth coming alongside each other, just like you shared, Dana, as they've learned to help each other. Another way that we've used Carry Plus is in short-term missions. When a youth group goes on short-term mission, you're working with individuals that have these kind of issues. They're just in another land or another people group or another city. And again, learning to work together to catch the clues and to leverage how to give an infusion of hope is how I'd like to say that, an infusion of hope by learning how to walk and respond.
Absolutely. Yes, the Carry Plus, as we mentioned on the previous episode, is an excellent resource in equipping and training adults and young people alike. I highly recommend it for Sunday school leaders, life group leaders, small group leaders, whatever your community calls them, the leadership, business leaders, your Bible study group, youth groups, youth ministries. Just, we all need this training because it's around us everywhere. People we work with, people we're sitting next to in church are struggling with these thoughts. So it's a conversation for all of us. And when it comes to young people, what I've learned along the way is how valuable it is to empower them, not to do things for them, but actually equip and prepare them, because they are not going to live at your house forever. They are going to leave and they are going to be out there. And so we want to raise and empower these young people that are confident in God. They are confident in their identity, that they know how to come alongside someone in love. They know how to rightly burden bear, as Molly said. They know how to just come along and care and say, I can't fix this, but I'm going to get you to connect you to the person that can. I don't know the answer, but I'm going to help you find that, because the answer's there and God loves you. And we're going to pray about this and we're going to work this through. And just being part of the solution. I'm very passionate in this hour about equipping the believers to be part of the solution. Got lots of crisis, and this conversation about suicide awareness and prevention is huge. And so, church, let's be a part of this solution. Let's empower our young people to be the ones that identify and recognize this. As they get older and older, they're with you less and less. They're at the sports teams. They're in the theater group. They're with their friends more often, more hours of the day than they're even in the house. So let's empower them to be life givers and be ones that can help rescue and save lives. I love this conversation, Molly. I'm so thankful for the resources. So we've mentioned Carry Plus. You have another course for parents called Parenting in the Face of Futility. Would you like to just share anything about that or what that course provides?
Well, that course was birthed out of, we heard from so many families that were struggling as the young person was beginning to develop and grow older and older and make some different choices that didn't seem in congruence with the family values and dynamics. And that's a valuable place to start. We work alongside with this online program, which is Parenting in the Face of Futility, to teach the parents that their ability to transition for themselves into a new role, a new way of acting, believing, and thinking in response to your young person is required for them. It's not just the young person that's evolving, it's the parent, because there's a time of teaching, there's a time of mentoring, and then there's a time of coaching and releasing. And how that looks and ways in which to do that in an honoring way for yourself, your own family values, and for the emerging values that the young person needs to find for themselves. We do not want to be standing on the corner of righteousness and then saying that the young person has to come and be on that same corner. They need their own corner of the world. They got to figure some things out. So if you want to really empower them, let go of your corner and begin to ask God to just enlarge your vision on how this is to look in the design that God has given your young person.
Absolutely. That's so true. He has great plans for them, and we just want to partner with what those are. And I love that. Thank you for that encouragement. So we want to just remind everyone, first of all, don't forget the number 988. That is the Suicide Crisis Lifeline. Tell your young people that number. Anyone that we encounter who is in that crisis or acute phase of a plan, that they have decided that suicide is their plan, we want to connect them to that right away. That is the emergency room type of help we want to connect. For those that are walking out some other inner healing aspects, maybe learning who they are or working through loss and some difficult things, whether a young person or an adult, Molly does see both, as young as 10. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Absolutely. So as young as 10. So you can reach Molly. You can email her directly at healing@hiswholehouse.org or www.hiswholehouse, wholehouse.org for services, for prayer ministry, for the family integration conversations. To reach any of these courses, the Carry Plus or the Parenting in the Face of Futility, you can also contact her there for speaking, being part of your next workshop or leadership training. So I highly encourage you to consider how the Lord might be inviting you to respond to this conversation today, that we can all be part of that solution. As I just remember, and it is such an important work, the Lord reminded me of his word this morning, Psalm 34:18, where he says, the Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And he is not too far away. His arm is not too short to save and to intervene and to help at any point in this process. So I just encourage you that the Lord does want to partner with you in your own pain or as you walk with another in their pain. Just remembering that the gift of presence is one of the most important and healing gifts that we can give to those who are grieving. And as a church, in our series on healing the heart of the church, if we're seeking a move of God in this time, we have to prepare our hearts to receive it. We have to make space for healing and wholeness in our own hearts, walking with others for their healing and wholeness, so that we can all move forward together, fearless and free, to be all that he's created us to be. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, please do at fearlessandfreecommunity.com, where you can receive emails. It's free emails and free prayer and reflective guides for each of our episodes. Also, if you found this episode helpful today or the previous episode, if you would go wherever you listen to podcasts and share it with your friends and family, pass it around, and take a moment to give a review. It's a help and a blessing to us and these ministries that are represented. So thank you so much, Molly, for being with us, and would love for you to just pray a blessing over our listeners today, maybe specifically for parents as they walk with their young people.
Father, we're just so grateful for the parents that are keying in to their youth. And Lord, you know the pain of the relentless sense of not knowing exactly how to get a foothold in the middle of young people and the way that they are coming with such different viewpoints and perspectives and tools. That, Lord, you are not caught unaware. And we ask, Lord, that you would come alongside the parents and the young people alike to bring a new connection across the continuum of your love that will bridge a gap and also bring healing into many lives, because you care about each one and our unique design, and as a whole, how that we can experience and regard and respect and come with the fullness of your original intent for us as the family of God. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Fearless and Free Spirit, Soul, Body with host Dana Grindal. Please go to fearlessandfreecommunity.com to access bonus podcast content. To connect with Dana, go to danagrindal.com. Thanks for joining us.